I can count on one hand how many times in my life I questioned my ability to sort through what was going on. And for those of you who listened to my first podcast about bipolar disorder, as a person who lives with bipolar disorder, you have to kind of check in with yourself. Well, the idea is to be able to check in with yourself. Some people may not have the resources and or the ability to do so. But when you're as fortunate as I was, and I am, to be able to do so, you really should. Sometimes you kind of feel like you're losing your shit. And I can think of 3 times in my life when it happened. And as a brown bipolar bear, I really, really had to pay attention to how to manage reality, fact, and fiction. On this episode of the Silver Fox Journal Podcast, we delve into part 2 of the brown bipolar bear, losing my shit. Are you ready? Let's go. So I thought about this and, let me first start off by saying when I posted my original podcast about bipolar disorder and realizing that it is a touchy subject for some people, I didn't know really what to expect. But I will say that the feedback, and not just the verbal feedback, but the feedback that I've seen from my analytics, whether it's whatever platform I'm looking on, most of my plays and downloads come from my bipolar disorder discussion called the Brown Bipolar Bear. So if you're listening to this for the first time and you've run across part 2, please, I implore you to listen to part 1. It's more about a history and understanding of bipolar disorder. But this episode, I've had enough time to kind of settle down with where I am in my life currently. And, some people would say, why are you sharing this? But I think it's a great opportunity to share it. And I think it's a great thing to share. I often have people in general, when they talk about my disposition and my ability to communicate with people and how calm I am, I've had people ask me why I am. But even after this episode, the last episode of the Brown Bipolar Bear, and in general conversation, if I'm in an intimate enough setting where I feel like the person I'm talking to can enjoy and learn from what I discuss about my bipolar disorder, I take the time to answer questions, and I also take the time to discuss certain parts of my journey that have made me be who I am, stronger, more vulnerable, and willing to discuss something that is a lot more prevalent than people want to think. So one of the things I recognize as a check-in with mental illness is being able to determine, how do you really feel if you're going to lose your shit? I didn't know what that felt like. And to be honest with you, when I look back on it and I think about all my time in therapy, my therapist often spoke about there being some type of change in a person's life where whether you're, with the genetic predisposition to having bipolar disorder, whatever anybody believes, but there is some research, there's always a trigger. And that's something she said. Do you know what your trigger was? And after going through some of the EMDR, which that's another discussion, which I think is an awesome tool in helping people deal with their mental illness as well as trauma. Going through that process, I discovered that one of my triggers was actually probably my first main I'm losing moment. But when I think about the 3 moments that touched my life, it made me kind of evaluate what my mental illness looked like. It's through different periods of my life. The first one, which would be my trigger, happened during my first marriage when I was very young. But that's another conversation. The second time, first, if you look at not being the trigger, my second marriage, and I have to say this because I have had 2 ex-husbands, and I'm not ashamed to say it. That's just what it is. I'll say X1, X2. So with X2, as if for those of you who've listened to my previous podcast, our relationship didn't work. There was an extramarital affair, and life happened, and things changed. And so, long story short, he had taken to having another woman in his life, and I just was devastated with that. But when we got to the point where we realized that it wasn't going to work and we were going to have to do something else, at the time that we made this decision, we weren't decided 100% sure that we were going to get divorced, but we knew something was going to change and we didn't need to be together. So we lived in the house together for an entire year. Talk about uncomfortable. Lived in the house with each other, and we kind of separated our lives as much as we could. The one thing that I worked on during therapy was recognizing that he was really literally going to do whatever he wanted to do. And, it wasn't until my last relationship that I kind of put value into how he felt in his actions, not absolving him for the things that he did, but recognizing that a lot of what he did was probably out of the need for self-preservation and to feel kind of connected to what he wanted to do, because maybe being with me wasn't what he wanted to do. Well, no, not maybe. He didn't. I'm not sad about that, but I am definitely more relieved about it now that I have more of an awareness of that situation. But years before that time, there was an understanding that the two of us had, and it came from a conversation after making a purchase of a purse. I have champagne wishes and caviar dreams, and until I grow up and become a big girl, I won't be able to buy $4,000 or $5,000 purses. I probably never will, but I do like and love beautiful bags and shoes. Just like he loved his technology and his video games. That was just something that we did. He didn't see the need in me purchasing the shoes and purses, whereas I always saw the value in what he felt made him happy, and that was his technology. So we had a conversation one time, and he was just like, he thought flowers were dumb because they die. He didn't understand how many reasons why I had so many different purses and shoes. And we went through this whole conversation, and needless to say, by the end of it, both of us had our own viewpoint. But my biggest viewpoint was, you know what? You don't have to like my purses. You don't have to like my shoes. How about we do this? I will never ask you to buy me another purse or a pair of shoes. That'll be my thing. Now, if I so choose to take my money and purchase something for you that's your technology, I'll do so. If you want a new headset, you want a new video game, I'll buy it. But if not, you know what? We're fine. Just know that your thing is your thing and my thing is my thing. So let that sit with you while I tell you the rest of the story. So once I realized, fast forward several years, and I realized our marriage is over, we're still living in the situation that we're living in. What I recognized every time my husband would come home, ex-husband, E2, X2, whatever. I won't use their name out of respect, but which is stupid because people who know me would be like, oh, that's our ex-husband. But anyway, so he would come home, and when I would do the laundry or look on the chair or somewhere, there'd be dog hair. Well, that doesn't sound like a big idea. It doesn't sound like a big, issue. But when you're a person who has no dogs, no cats, no pets, and you have an allergy to certain animals, looking around and seeing dog hair was kind of like, what? So one day I'll never forget asking him, I was like, hey, let's just go ahead and straighten something up here. I can't stop you from doing certain things considering our circumstance, but what I will ask you to do is to respect our lifestyle and the way that I live. I have an allergy to pets. Does your girlfriend that you choose to take as a married man, does your girlfriend have a pet? Yes, she has a dog. I think she had a dog or two. I don't really remember. And I was just like, well, how about you do me a favor? Do not come in here with your dog hair. Let's just not do that. Well, it seemed okay for a while. And then I started to realize, I was like, hey, man, there's a lot of dog hair. Now, it wasn't until I lived with my sister many years after I got divorced that I recognized, it's almost damn near impossible to get rid of dog hair, and it takes time. So, when I saw the dog hair start to diminish, I was like, okay, we're good. Well, this one particular day, I was alone. I was at home. and I had gone in the closet. And I guess a part of that time period, again, if you've listened to some of my other podcasts, I was having some other issues going on at the time. So I was at home, had a lot of time to myself, and I went in the closet and I was nesting, so to speak. I was moving things around and taking stuff out of containers and moving my purses. Remember the story about my purses and my shoes? So I was rearranging things. We had this beautiful apartment with this lovely bedroom, bathroom, suite, and the closet was huge. You could put a queen size bed and walk around in it if you could. So I looked, and most of my bags are black. And this day, I don't know what happened. It was a beautiful day outside. I'll never forget. The sun was out, but I had been inside all day. I looked down on two of my bags that I had spent hundreds of dollars on. 2 black bags and 1 gray bag. And there was dog hair. I thought I was going to lose my mind. I thought that the egg had cracked, that I was getting ready to lose it. My skin instantly got warm. I could feel my blood pressure rise. And I would have to say, for the first time in my adult life, I literally saw red. You know how like you've heard people say, I saw red? No, I I thought I saw red. And there was this overwhelming feeling of angst and anger, but there was a simultaneous feeling of, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I don't know what else to do. And I start to weep because I'm just like, what am I going to do? Now, mind you, it was the middle of the day, sun was out, I'm in my closet, and immediately I start to think, what can I do to prepare myself for these feelings and get out of this? During that time, I was also struggling with my religious beliefs and some of my spirituality, and I was trying to build that and refortify that, and I prayed, and I asked for guidance, and I got to the point to where I didn't know what to do. I was already going through heavy therapy. I was seeing my therapist about 2 times a week for about 50 minutes to an hour a day. I was on medication, and just things were not stable. Well, I'm already bipolar, but then you add in additional stressors, and it's like trying to manage yourself is very difficult. So I sat in that closet. I remember closing the door. I have no idea to this day. That was probably about 10 years ago. Longer than that. I'm in 2000. It's 2019. So this was almost 10 years ago, 9 to 10 years ago. And I still don't have an answer by telling the story. But I know that I locked myself in that closet for hours. So much so that when I walked out of the closet, it was nighttime. And there was a part of me that changed that day that made me recognize that it was almost like something sloughed off, like the feeling of angst and sadness and anger and all those things in me that made me feel like I wasn't going to be able to manage just melted away. That was my mental baseline for knowing when I wasn't okay. The second time I realized I wasn't okay, I was living with my sister. I was experiencing a lot of difficulty. And I just realized, in my mind, I was like, okay, everything's fine. Well, thank you to some of our social programs. At the time, I lost my health care, which meant I no longer had access to medication. And so I felt empowered by the amount of time and money that I had spent on my therapy that, I've learned everything I needed. I had done meditation. I had done prayer. I had done mindfulness. I had done all these things to prepare myself for the lean times. Let's just put it that way, because I knew they were coming. I just had so much on my plate. I remember coming home one day and I looked at my sister. She had been at home. I got home. I looked at her and I said, look, I'm not okay. I made a promise to my therapist several years ago that if I ever got to the point to where I realized I wasn't okay, that I would check in with myself and get the help that I needed. And that's exactly what I did. So I went to the mental health facility where I live, the emergency facility. And I was like, hey, I don't know what completely losing my shit looks like, but I don't feel like I'm maintaining my shit right now. I've also been off of my medication. At that time, I had been off my medication for about 4 years, which was almost unheard of. I had weaned myself off of it, and that was not the best thing to do. So for those of you who are listening, you have a mental health, if you have a mental illness and you're taking medication, follow your instructions with your medication based on what your prescription or your doctor says. But anyway, I needed that boost, and I was able to go back, and not the best therapy, but I was able to get back on my medicine and get back on my therapy, and I've been on it ever since. Fast forward about, how many years was that? I don't know, maybe about 4 years. Recently, I have gone through some difficulty. Let's just put it this way. I was experiencing some things that were more difficult than I wasn't aware if I was able to manage them the way they were. And so one day I went to work and I just lost it. And I said, I don't think I'm okay and I need some help. So I called a friend of mine and I was able to leave work, and I went to the same mental facility that I had gone to about 4.5 years prior. And I remember sitting there and I just felt weak. And I remember thinking, what is your baseline? Do you remember when you saw that dog hair and you thought you were getting ready to lose your mind? Are you there? You know, I checked in and I went, and a very, very good dear friend of mine took me to the facility. We sat together. And I remember as I was waiting to be seen by triage to check and make sure, honestly, let's just be honest, for those of you who are not familiar with the mental health programs that are available. But you see triage people to determine if you're well enough to go home or if you need to be admitted. That's honestly what it is. I didn't think I needed to be admitted. I just needed a little bit of help. And so I had gone in the bathroom and I had a Eureka moment. At this very moment, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I didn't know. I thought, well, I don't think I'm as bad as my baseline, but something's not right. I went in the bathroom. And this is all I saw. It was a very sterile environment. It was beige. There was a metal trash can. A mirror as if you were in prison. It wasn't glass. It was metal. They had found a way to mount the tissue and the paper towel in such a way to where it couldn't be removed from the wall. The toilet was one solid piece. And as I sat there, you know, kind of sorting through my day and how long I had cried and how discouraged I felt, I realized that I was having a rough spot, but I wasn't losing my shit, because there was a reason for the way the bathroom was. There wasn't a mirror in the bathroom. There wasn't a freestanding paper towel holder or a seat that could move. A trash can that wasn't bolted to the floor. All of that happened because someone else didn't feel like they had a way to live or an option other than to do something to harm themselves. And I thought, you know what? You didn't lose your shit today. You had a rough spot. You had a difficult moment. But right now, you just need to tune up. And once you get that tune up, you'll be back on the road. I wanted to share that story because I think sometimes what happens, and it's been my experience having facilitated mental health support groups, as well as discussing mental illness with people who have, lived with it for many years, for decades. I wanted to share that story because the biggest part of being able to maintain your mental health, even if you don't have you don't have a psychiatric issue or concern, is knowing what your baseline is, what makes you tick, what your limit is, and how much you can manage. And that day, after the dog hair, after the issue where I felt like I just wasn't going to be able to stay where my sister was, all those different times I thought I saw birds flying that weren't there, or shadows in the corner, or noises that probably didn't happen. The day that I went in that bathroom to look for tissue and to use it, I realized I was a lot better than I thought I was. And that I was also a lot better than some other people could ever imagine they would be. Because they didn't have the resources and the time and the knowledge to make the decisions that I had made, to be a better version of myself. And so for those of you who listened in my last episode, looking for little nuggets of wisdom, I can just say, know your baseline. Know who you are every day. Know what that looks like and know how to translate that to being the best version of yourself that you can be every day. And never feel proud. I don't care if you're bipolar, schizoaffective, or just plain all over the place. Never be afraid to ask for help. Never be afraid to say, right now, I'm not okay, and I need something else other than what I'm doing right now. As usual, I'd like to thank you for stopping by, for listening to my story. You could have been anywhere else other than where you are right now. And for the last close to 21 minutes, you listened to my story, and I'm forever grateful. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Silver Fox Journal podcast.